yeux de lumière qui voient passer au loin les oiseaux.
So the first part then, lecture again. In a way it is something we had been talking about, meaning recapitulation, but it is very much as well putting it into different context, or putting it into context. Meaning the tension we face when we will talk about, or while we are talking about human rights, is a multiple one. And we are talking about rights that are written down. We talked last time about the formulation of law, and it's, if you want, it's givenness, it's ratification in acts, in constitutions, but at the same time, they are defined in historical terms, they are defined in spatial terms, in social terms, and it is not least a matter of interpretation. I quoted this already and I thought about it again. It's kind of interesting, this quote from David Davis, this judge, saying 1866, by the protection of the law, human rights are secured. So you need law to secure law, which in a way is the old question we face again and again, the hen and the egg. How can we get law, how can we get rights if we don't have them, if we don't have the right to make rights? So it is an interesting tension which actually goes, I've just prepared another presentation for the weekend, which is going through the entire history of law, of jurisprudence, of defining what it actually is. And then you have the positivist position that says law is there and you just have to follow it, which of course is very simple, because then you have what you don't have yet. They just say whatever is there is valid, you have to refer this, full stop, basta, no discussion, no further discussion, no development. And this is what I said as well, not indirectly, but with a reference to what is called today human rights, because we have, of course, some form of human rights since a long time, but we did not talk about human rights. We did not have any legal document. I hesitate rather just with a legal document. We don't have this. We have gradually something of grades of increasingly precise definitions of what we call today human rights. Now, don't ask me in 100 or 200 years, because then I will probably say, or hopefully say, what we have had in 2019 was not really human rights. This was just another point beginning a discussion, but it was a kind of germ. It was not what we hopefully will have then. Meaning, when we talk about the good society in ancient times, this was as well the notion of there should be something, everybody should have the right to live this way. Now the term right was a completely different one. But at the same time, I said, we have had already in Rome this idea of the 12 tables, where you can say, using today's term, you have a consolidation of different rules. And this is the decisive thing. We are basically talking about norms and rules that are defined in a specific way. That are defined in a specific way means they are defined now, written down, and we can refer to them. We can refer to them as a rule that is valid, and that is, and this is another decisive point, agreed upon, meaning we have one law in different countries on different levels or whatsoever, but we do not have different laws, hopefully, at least this is the idea, for the same thing. We have one rule, one set of rules that regulates traffic with automobiles and on the streets. We do not have one for pedestrians and one for cars and one for scooters, and everybody or every rule is a different one. We have, of course, in this rule, traffic rules, we have different sections, and they are regulating what people with this one vehicle may do, not with the other. So this is important to keep it in mind, that we have this consolidation of rules that is agreed upon. And it is agreed upon in relevant forms, meaning we have to follow them. We, those who are part of this constituency. No such thing can never, ever be complete. You cannot rule everything. There would be only one way of ruling everything, and this is one person, one small group has the power to say whatever is according to the rules. Meaning they set the rules in the moment when they are needed, or he or she sets the rules whenever they are needed. This would be not law in this sense, it would be an arbitrary rule setting that follows just the situation. Now I need a law that forbids having an umbrella with you, because now it could be seen as a weapon. When it's raining, it's of course different. Then I change the law and say, now you are allowed to have an umbrella, because now it's not a weapon, but it's definitely an umbrella. Who knows? Nobody really knows, because somebody may still use it as a weapon. So you have always these tensions, and I think I quoted already Hart, which is another famous jurist and theoretician in this way. We can say laws are incurably incomplete, and we have to decide the penumerable cases rationally by reference to social aims. You watched the film, I hope, and there was this cui bono. We have aims. Every situation, in every situation, there is a certain aim. And we as individuals, we as groups, follow the aims, and of course we have different aims. And now we have, this is the idea of law, we have to sort out in a specific way, in an agreed upon way, how to regulate these different interests, how to regulate the conflicts, the potential conflicts. So even if it is not a manifest conflict, we have always to consider it may be a conflict. If there is only one person in place, it's fine. As soon as a second person can come into the place and may have different interests, we have to know how to solve it in advance. And this is a decisive moment of law as well. It is defining matters in advance. It is not making the law while we need it in this situation, but it is making this rule for the future, for the case that something occurs, of which we do not know all the conditions. We may know some conditions, we try, and this is this rationality thing, we will try to make them as rational as possible, meaning as countable, manageable in advance as possible, but we don't know. Even the most scientific, so-called scientific methods do not know what is going to happen in the future. There are very simple things we know, but these are really, in a way, irrelevant because there are so much taken for, or can be taken so much for granted that it is not something we have to regulate further. So, we are looking for a rule. Its validity, which may be based on different attitudes, legitimacy, force by nature, if you want, that we simply cannot work 24 hours for 1 month. We may be able to do it one day. After a while, there is exhaustion. After a while, we will be tired. And after a while, we won't actually work anymore, or even we won't function. That's a law given by nature, if you want. In this sense, we have to allow for breaks. This was different with slaves, that we didn't have to allow for breaks, because if they didn't work anymore, if they passed away while they had been working, that had been in inverted commas okay. They had been owned, they had not been considered as human beings. There was is a discussion about it, how to treat slaves actually, because it is of course in the interest of the slave owner to treat them reasonably well, because otherwise they won't be there for working. It is even in several cases valuable to educate them well, because you don't want them to do something repetitive, but you want a slave to educate your children. So you had to educate the slave that she would be able to educate your children. Validity and I write now actually different rules and norms. Validity in different respects, and manageability. You needed something that can be managed by people in a reasonable way. This is a tension in law always, basically said with these two quotes as well. A judge or court has to be able to deal, to handle a certain rule. What can I do as judge if the rule says you have to be good? Nothing. You have to be good can be everything. It's my interpretation, discussion. I can decide what is good, meaning I can do whatever I think is good, meaning the rule doesn't exist really. It's not manageable. And then, of course, it has to be as well so open that I can manage it, that I can deal with it in different situations. Dress codes, religious dress codes, for instance, if it defines the haircut, it can say something of long hair or over long hair is not allowed, but it cannot say exactly so this is the length in millimeters. Because I cannot really go there and find out with every single person, this is, I don't know, 0.6 millimeter. This is not manageable. Especially it's not manageable looking back. What was the situation when the perpetrator did that, and that was the dress code observed. Management means as well, in advance, I define the rule for the future, not for the moment. I have to interpret a rule for the moment, but I do not define the rule for the moment. And I do it in advance, meaning I do not say, bringing you to court, and that they say, I could say, well, actually the rule at that time was, and then I think about it. But you didn't behave according to the rule. So it has to be in advance, it has to be a rule that is manageable, that is valid in terms of legitimacy, whatever the legitimacy is, and so on. Now it can be, or it is historically, important to look at this validity, because we talked about it, this validity is grounded in different reasoning. And I say reasoning because it is the way in which people used their reason. Now we can say from today, from today's perspective, this was not reasonable, this was not using reason, it was emotional, it was whatsoever. But we have this idea of divine law, defined, given by some kind of deity. We have the idea of natural law, given by nature, and I'm not talking about now you have to sleep at some stage, but I'm now talking about nature defines what the right is. It's a natural law that we have private property. John Locke. John Locke was saying exactly this, that is a natural law. Everybody has this right to own property. It was not only John Locke, but he was outstanding in this. And it is given by nature. We don't have to discuss this. It is not a social issue, but given by nature. Whereas we have other traditions that actually say it is a matter of negotiations. You would have what we call contractualists there that say actually there is a social contract. Those people who live together define in a contract, in a social contract, how they want to behave, how they want to relate to each other. Meaning it includes what are the rights of each individual. Do they have the same right? Are the rights different? And why is A or B the case? Where is an overlap? And then really refer to very simple things. Children are humans, right? Children have a gender, meaning they are what we usually refer to at least male or female. So what is with a male child? And we have this discussion that we discuss children's rights separately. Even biologically, they are, of course, human beings. And then we have them in terms of different genders, different sex. So how do we deal with it? There is an overlap, and we have to deal with this overlap. And it is a matter of power and as well of a decision where we negotiate really in terms of reason of trying to find a solution, a compromise. This is very important as well, that power, law based on power, simply on violence, is not sustainable. It may last for a short while, but it is not sustainable. And this, of course, depends on the understanding of what the human is, what human beings are in terms of a natural behavior, what is our understanding of society. I said the contractualist, this idea of people sit together, basically, and draw up a contract, a social contract. Anybody knows a famous social contract or contractualist name? That's the French Jean-Jacques Rousseau, often quoted. I don't know if often read. And then you would have another, that's John Hobbes, with the Leviathan. Leviathan stands for a specific social contract as well. And there you see something interesting. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was French Genoese from Switzerland, which is today Switzerland, and John Hobbes was from England. So you have different national traditions, different national settings that influence as well the way of thinking in terms of what are humans alike. For Hobbes, there had been a permanent war amongst people, and because people had been in war, they did something they probably never would do. They drew up a contract and said, because we will kill each other, we have this instance of a state, of a strong state, that basically hinders us to kill each other. So this permanent war of everybody against everybody else was kind of limited by the state. Whereas Jean-Jacques Rousseau was just the opposite. As far as I know, it's a misquote, but he supposedly said something, humans go back into the trees and behave like apes. I never found it at least. But the idea was really humans are good. They don't need regulation. Every regulation you have is too much. Leave them as they are. They are able to regulate themselves, the relation amongst each other, with some exceptions. And you need some exceptions where you have a social contract, where people literally negotiate and regulate the way they live together. So we start with something which occurs in at least Western thinking frequently, this magical number of 3. Divine, natural, and social or negotiated law, as a source of our general law. And we have had already this idea of a set of 3 guiding matters that are standing behind the question, why do we actually need law? Why do we need rules? Because of reality. Reality is split as well, and this is not what I say it is split, but this is the view, is split it ought to be. This is how it should be. This is how God, the deity, nature wanted things to be. This is our general agreement, negotiated how things should be, ought to be. And I said, it's a little bit my own thing, there are 2 levels of this ought to be. The one is a very general one, valid for everybody, all the times, wherever you go. And then you have ought to be as things are. Because people do not write to be anymore, they write to be. This is what we have to live with, and it's okay. If everybody understands to be as to be, fine. There's no harm to this. So it's the second level of ought to be. The ideal under the given conditions. Under the conditions, under the given conditions, it's kind of, sometimes you come across these funny things, I didn't know it up to recently, with WeChat. You have your WeChat, you get a message in a language you don't understand. I think you have to press it for a couple of seconds or something, and then there are set different options. One is translate. So you don't have to write ought to be, you write whatever you want to write. Somebody else presses on this thing and gets in his, her language ought to be. Now then you have to go actually back, I guess you have to write to be and not to be. So in this way it changes as well this reality, what it means. At some stage it may be that we do not have to know different languages. I'm very skeptical about this, but that we speak basically one global language, even if we only know the one language we know. Things like this, I mentioned as well, artificial intelligence. I don't know enough about it, but this discussion, this very critical, rejecting discussion about genetic modification is a tricky one for me at least, that of course you can overdo it, but at the same time breeding farming is, in a way, for me at least, by definition, genetical modification. To some extent. Do not put different animals together, and you do not put very weak whatsoever animals together with a healthy one. You know it most likely won't work. So you select animals and you hope that it then works out. Today you make it artificially. Anyway, we have then simply the not should be, but this is how things are. We have to live with the situation that there are some people, actually myself, I had been definitely in this situation when I got, at that time it was called a text message, what is today, what's up, and we checked and all this. And somebody wrote to me a kind of lengthy text message, which I didn't understand, because it was full of to be for, and I don't know what. I thought, girl, what I'm doing, what? Now, she had a smallish child and was used from there to this kind of language. And of course, she didn't think about it, that an old guy like myself, at the time I was probably 30 or 40, doesn't understand it. And this is something, this is how things are. And then you have to, this is a decision, or this is a discussion nowadays, you have to decide, is it okay that we write to be? Or is it okay in certain conditions and people still have to write to be able to write to be? Question of education. What is relevant in terms of education? What is the aim? Coming back to this, what is the aim to be able to write, to read, and to do it properly? So, three realities in a way, and we have to negotiate with this contract, with the law, the different ways of dealing with it, and when do we deal with which rule, because it may be different. Just one example from my kind of personal experience, having lived in Ireland, and where you could probably have brought this case to the Human Rights Court, I don't know, would have been interesting. In Ireland, we have special schools where people are educated, where people are speaking the native language, the Irish, Celtic, Gaelic. Not many people do it, so they have this special school, and people go there. Everything is in Irish. Teaching mathematics, teaching computer science, which is actually difficult because there are no Irish, original genuine Irish terms for computer stuff, or for democracy or something like this. You teach everything in Irish. In the breaks, during the breaks, you speak Irish. And then there was this, and it is part of the national schooling system. They get actually special money in these schools, are really better equipped than others. They have this privilege, and then they, everything is in Irish. It's a right to go to these schools, meaning it's part of the national educational system. Now, I don't know exactly, I don't remember exactly what happened, but during the break, one child, I don't know, stumbled, fell, and broke a glass, let's say, or I don't know what happened exactly, and said something I won't repeat here in English. One of these naughty words. What happened? The child was expelled from the school not because of using this term, but because of saying it in our English. So what is the story in terms of human rights? You are not allowed to use your language or one of your languages. You are not allowed to go to school because of, and. It's so much implied in such a small, seemingly small, and for me, obviously, ridiculous case. I would have said something in the same language, on the same level, and have said, okay, next time I'll speak Irish. Of course these things happen. But where is the border? Where is the situation we are dealing with? So what are, if you want, what are the problems we want to solve with law, with these, what are the questions we want to answer? So one of the questions is, what is the character of the laws? Or rules? And I'm not talking here now about are they divine, are they natural, or whatsoever, but are they actually fundamental rules? What is defined as a fundamental issue? What is relevant enough to be defined, to be understood as essential? And don't think it is an easy question. Of course, in some respect or in some cases, it is very simple, it's very easy to say, and then you can ask a physician or whatsoever, how much food of which quality do you need to survive? Did I say it? Of course it is simple, but what is surviving? The life expectancy today, the life expectancy 100 years ago, the life expectancy 400 years ago. Hugely different. The life expectancy in country A and in country B today, hugely different. The life expectancy for women and for men in the same country, hugely different. So how do we define the level, the standard that is relevant? We can say this is what within this society is standard, or we can say as well what is possible. And what do we want? How do we want to live? Is it something we want, that people are growing older and older and older, becoming older and older and older, and most likely they end up the last years of their life being in care homes? Now, personally, I want to leave before this happens and before I'm completely dependent, not only physically, but as well mentally. And I saw care homes where I thought, if you still have the power, the energy to do it, you won't end up in such a way. It was just, I don't know, a mistreatment of human life, of human existence. Now you can say, but they lived. The right to live is more relevant than the right to have a good life. Then you can say as well, okay, have another standard, say this is good life, this is okay, but if it's possible to live in country A up to 70 years, then in country B you have the same right. But the conditions in country B are completely different, and for whatever reasons actually, people are not living so long. Which means as well does process matter? This is a very common question in law. Is it relevant how we come to the definition? By experts, by allowing people to decide themselves. A typical question as well, potential question, you have around euthanasia, something like this. I'm fatally ill. Is it up to me to decide, before I enter this phase of suffering, just give me an injection, that's it? Or is it up to experts who decide? Then you can say one expert or two experts or a team of expert, team of different experts, a psychologist, a medical doctor, whatsoever, that they decide this is the point where you support or where you undertake euthanasia. Or do you say there is no thing like euthanasia? It's your decision, there is no decision, no thing like it, or it is the decision of somebody else. And of course you have different reasoning again in this case, that in a country like Germany you are extremely hesitant to talk in any way positive about euthanasia. They just genocided the Jews and communists and kind of everybody who was in the way. And you have other countries where they do not have this experience, and where they do have the experience. Why should people suffer to such an extent? And why should they not be able to decide otherwise? How to decide it? What is the process?
Experience. By experience.
By experience. Okay, but you make the experience, you have to come to the point allowing experience, and you have, this is exactly this tricky question. You have to decide what you cannot decide yet in law.
No, by something what happened, you can change it by process. By something what happened, you can change it by process.
Okay, but what is the process? How many, for instance, how many people are needed to have a kind of, they decide? How many cases? Is cancer the same, or is there the same reasoning, the same process as, and I now take it for a special reason, as people getting injured by an accident and getting blind? How many people say, after hearing something about an accident, or even people themselves being involved in an accident, their first reaction, being blind for the rest of my life, having lost both legs, being not able to speak anymore, I don't want to live anymore. And then they learn to live with the situation, and they, at least many, say, I didn't know this, it was so stupid to say I don't want to live anymore, because I have a good life now, even if I have this and that suffering from this and that illness. And then actually we come to this point, you can make there, moral work. What is the value or the meaning of moral work? And moral I take in a very wide sense of ethical or political as well. How do we decide? What are the criteria and how do we negotiate when it comes to conflicts, if you want, around or different opinions around certain issues? And if you go through your own history, meaning your experience with, for instance, death, euthanasia or something like this, not even going so far, the Catholic Church now has a kind of dispute around this, if you want, currently. Many disputes now. The one is the gender dispute, which is not of interest now for me. But there is a question of can women take on all positions? But there is one, I thought it's very interesting, that Papa Paolo, this Polish pope, he decided, apparently, for himself, I have to suffer. This is what God determined. And I always thought when I saw him, I didn't see him often in such situations, when I saw him the last years, I thought it's so, ridiculous. He knew he ran completely out of energy. He knew he is not able to speak properly anymore. And he was performing in such a, be it as it is, important position. He was the leader of one world church. So I would have said, sorry, just leave. If there is a God, which I doubt, but then this God will say, leave, don't suffer, don't go through it. It's just useless. Whereas he said, no, I'm chosen, I have to go through this. Whereas I think it was actually then Papa Benedetto, the following part, who said at some stage when he was mentioning he is getting weak, I quit the job. And he went through the law, and it was possible by the law, by the canon law, and he said, I quit. Before I'm getting to the stage of talking nonsense, I retire. This was actually law, it was not law made in the situation, but it was the interpretation, because he was actually the second pope who retired. It had been hundreds of years before somebody doing this thing. He was the second and supposedly the first suffered severely in hell. So he reinterpreted law and said, it is possible, it's okay, I do it. The Pope now, Papa Francesco, actually said in the beginning, I will retire. I will do the job for, actually he should be retired already, but that's another story. I will do the job for a couple of years and then I retire. Because he actually suffers from a serious lung problem. He said, I'm physically not in a position to do this job for the rest of my life. So, what is the moral work? What is the it's a little bit like the process, but what is the dispute around this? What are the values applied? And this means as well, and then we come to something that is linked, but where we actually have a group of 4. These rules have 2 dimensions at least. The one is individual behavior, and the other is what I refer to the social contract, the wider understanding. of what is going on. Call it the society, call it the group, whatever. But this is then something we have to deal with it. And again, variation of the theme, if you want, the cui bono, what is the point in setting up rules? Considering what not only Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, but what is a kind of general agreement today, in general terms, not in concrete terms, we are all equal. We are born equal, and there is no difference when we enter this world. So, one reasoning behind law, behind rules, is compensation. We are all born equal and free. I think that's exactly the word in Rousseau. All born equal and free, but we are born under different conditions. Meaning, the one is born with parents who are very rich, very educated, very healthy. And the other is born under conditions that make it extremely difficult to avail of knowledge. If your parents are very well educated, they pass the knowledge already on. If not, where to get it. Wealthy means if you are wealthy, most likely you have conditions where living conditions, accommodation, that allows you to grow up healthy. If you are growing up in a ghetto where it's very damp, where there is no protection against the weather, there is no air conditioning, but you have extreme temperatures, there's no heating, and you have to survive the winter with, I don't know, minus 20 degrees, which is not too bad. Different conditions. Consequences for your health status. So compensation for this, if you are living under these conditions, actually we, the society, we pay your air conditioning. If you can do it your own, fine, do it. But if you cannot do it for whatever reason, we look into the reasons, then we pay as society. Then we provide early education, we provide additional education or something like this. So this is, if you want, the good part of law, doing good, compensating for something. Then you would have another one, which at least from the perspective of those who are concerned is not so good, that is punishment. Sometimes going hand in hand with each other. And I'm now thinking of a case where you have discussions in human rights, in the human rights area as well. Education for everybody in all countries to a level that is unproblematic, let's say, that is a good standard. What is with the case of a child living up under very poor conditions? And I say, but you have to go to school. This child is actually working for the family and generating income. So if you force the child to go to school, it's punishment. Or if you punish the child for not going to school, or you say, actually, I compensate this family, that the family is not depending on this income. I give some money, some resources to the family, that the family actually can say, okay, we don't depend on our child going to work, generating income for us, but we get the income. Question, do you punish these parents if they say, but nevertheless we send our child not to school, but to work? These are concrete discussions where, of course, you limit the freedom. In a way, you limit the freedom of the parents by compensating them in conjunction with punishing them if they do not accept this kind of benefit. And then, of course, I said manageable earlier on, manageable, concrete. You have to define in advance in a way that the judge can say, in this case, we allow the parents to do what they do, namely sending their child to work, continue sending their child to work. In this case, we don't. These are really heavy discussions because, of course, you cannot change the entire conditions. You can give some money, which is compensation. But what is these parents, their parents, they have been used that their children go to work. They have been going to work, their parents have been going to work, their grandparents. So this is ingrained in the mindset of people. And now you force them to go to school, which is something very weird. In school, there is a teacher standing in front of the class and teaching them, forcing them, of which I do not know what it is, reading and writing. For me, reading and writing is something alien. I don't know what it is, because I don't know how to write, and I don't know what I can use it for. How my children should learn it. As well, where is, or how do you define child labor? Is it a holiday job? If you have school holidays, going there for 2 weeks, making some money, working at a petrol station, or I don't know what you do. Is that work? Or is that just an additional life experience? Isn't going to school and hard work? So this is allowed and other work is not allowed. How do you draw the borders? Where is where is the limit of one going to the other? Work, leisure time, self-determined leisure time. So you have the tension there, and then you have, of course, the protection that you need to make sure that if the child, well, let's go on with this case, if the child says to the parents, but listen, you get the money, I don't have to work, don't have to go to work to make money, I am supposed to go to school. And the parents say, you do not have to say anything, because you are just 6 years old or I don't know what, and you do what we tell you to do. Now you would need this kind of protection of the child that actually makes sure, in which way ever, you can use foster homes. If I get known that the parents force their children nevertheless to go to work, I take them out of this environment and they have a foster home, and there they can develop in a different way. There are different options, and you have to think about as well, again, the complexity of situations. What is with the discrimination of the parents possible? You get money to send your child to school, so you are so poor that you cannot pay for yourself. Or you take this money from this and that source, which is a bad source, or you just should follow the traditions, and this is not to send the child to school, but it is about working, making experience, learn something in life, for life. So there is discrimination, and a case where you have actually somewhat funny situations, hopefully then, where everybody knows it's just a fake situation, it's just a situation nobody really takes for serious, but the tradition of a village somewhere requires or is that in case of the marriage of the children, there is a trade, basically. So if I marry your daughter, you have to pay me X, epsilon, Z. Now everybody, the youngsters and the old one, know it's just whatever we give you. It is not really payment. It is not meant to be payment. We love each other, so that's fine. That's benefit enough, and there's no payment involved. Nevertheless, we write down or we act this way. You get, I don't know what you get in these cases, but we pretend to pay, just that the environment is happy with it. Kind of weird situations, but actually if you would not pretend it, there is this discrimination. So how far do you have to say, no, even if there is discrimination, I will not go with this tradition because it is ridiculous, because it is not respecting the dignity of the wife, or whatsoever. And then you would have another level of law, and that is correction. To correct something, it is linked in a way to compensation. To correct something where, in the case of disrespect of law, disrespect of certain conditions, you correct the situation afterwards because it is too late, that the law that had been in place is applied, and you have to do something, not to compensate for natural conditions, but you have to do something in terms of dealing with the situation as it is, meaning the ought to be true and it is. To correct the situation afterwards, to make sure, again, equality matters and equality is striking. We try whatever we can to reach at equality. Free and equal. And then going on in history, we said already free and equal as a matter of a process developing had been about rights as norms, as a rule, civil rights, meaning every citizen has the same right. It was the liberal idea, because every citizen is able to act in a rational way, is able and willing to act in a rational way. I will not arbitrarily do something that I do not want others to do. Kant, categorical imperative. I will behave in a way, in respecting you, in relating to you, I will do it in a way, rationally, that I can set as a general rule. I will not beat you, I will not, I will allow you to speak a sentence to the end, because I expect the same from you, that you can speak, that if it's your turn, you can speak this sentence, you can speak the idea up to the end. I will not interrupt you after you said the first two words. This is what I expect from you, and this is what I allow you, grant you as a civil right. Now, it is of course not about speaking a sentence or not, but it is about other things, free speech, equal conditions for being able to express yourself. Then you come, of course, later back to education. But first, you come to this matter of political rights, that of course for your civil rights, to exercise them, you need a certain framework. And this framework means you have to have a framework where it is ruled, where you have rules. This is the way that you can say whatever you are allowed to say. It's the political, or it's the polity, the institutional system, which may be very different. It may be a parliamentary democracy. It may have elections. It may have what is called basic democratic rules, where you have on certain issues plebiscites, different things, but you have a political framework that guarantee or that make it possible to exercise your civil rights. But what is the point if I have a polity, if I have a political system that allows me all these things, that writes down on the 24th of December there are elections. Everybody between or from the age of 18 is allowed to vote and allowed to stand as candidate. What is the point of it if I have this rule but nobody can read it? There must be the material conditions, or as it is said, the social rules, the social rights. I have the right to be educated. At least up to a standard that allows participating in society to a certain degree. Which means I don't have, not everybody has to have a doctorate and a professorship or whatever to be able to participate, but at least everybody has to have the basic skills of being able to read, getting this information. Or you can do it as well in another way. You do not have this requirement of being able to read, but you have another way of providing this information. Social rights, civil, political, and social rights. Then I come for today to the end of lecturing. This is much too short, actually. That another kind of trinity, we are struggling with it all the time. We have these three levels that, of course, we are individuals and we are acting on ourselves, on our own, and this is what we do. But we are social beings, meaning whatever we are doing in a certain social context, depending on the social context. Try to think something without using words. Try to think the sun is shining. Try to think I am a good person. Try to think I feel miserable today. Try to think this without using a word in your thinking. Can you do it? You automatically refer to some kind of language. You cannot think, I really feel great, the sun is shining, without thinking, I really feel great, the sun is shining. Bonjour, le soleil. Do you refer to something, to your own language? Or you refer to a foreign language, but you refer to language. And language, what is that? It is a social matter. This is because most of the people here in China speak Chinese, as simple as that. If it would not be a social thing, then we could have other ideas. One speaks Chinese, the other speaks Russian, the other speaks German. So you have this. Individual, but part of the social setting. And this is, of course, where you have, we talked about it, the state or the society requires that the individual actually speaks the language for certain positions or whatever it means. To settle for good in China or to work in a long-term, in a permanent position, as far as I know, you have to be able to speak Chinese. Fine. How do you learn Chinese? As an individual? Community. You speak to your peers, you speak a language at some stage. That's always I feel not happy about it, but it's a kind of comfort that English is the mostly spoken lingua franca. Everybody speaks English, and I said to some people, listen, this is your advantage. You don't have to learn another language, but we ruin your language because we don't speak properly English. So you get your benefit, you have to pay for it. And this is, of course, something where in a community, if you go talk to very old people, talk to children, at some stage you don't understand them because they are using terms, words in a completely different way. It's the community. And sometimes it's still possible to translate it, meaning I can talk to very old people and I can talk to very young people. But it had been the case that I said to my daughter, sorry, can you please translate this? I don't understand it. This is a language you speak now, 40 years after I had been in this age. I don't understand. So you have this community thing, and this is, of course, the problem for law, the challenge for law, I'd say, not necessarily a problem, but the challenge for law, and this is human rights law up to traffic law, by law. You have to find a regulation, rule, norm that works on all the three levels and brings them together. That it reflects again something of humanity, of human rights, wherever you live in 2019, this is valid, meaning you have here society at large on the global level, this is relevant, but this is relevant for you as individual, and this is what counts. Can you cope with it? Can society at large cope with your needs? Going to school or not going to school, up to which age, then you have it really on a very, very concrete level that, for instance, in one country, you begin to go to not kindergartens, but to the creche, and have a right to go to the creche with 6 months. And in other countries, there is no way of thinking about it. You may have the money, but you will go to the kindergarten with 3, or even to school than when you are 6 or something. So differences, the same, how long do you go there, how long do you have, how long is there an obligation to go to school, things like this. Link the two, bring them together, and this is how you then apply
Abandonné au sable blanc, blanc l'innocent, le sang du poète.